The first slivers of dawn rarely touched the town before Grace, the formidable widow biker, had already unlocked her garage workshop. The creak of the heavy metal door was a solitary symphony, a prelude to the day's quiet rituals. She moved with a practiced grace that belied her age. Her silver hair often tied back with a worn bandana, her hands, though gnarled, still possessed a mechanic's steady confidence. The air inside the cavernous space hummed with the ghosts of engines past, a comforting scent of oil, metal, and distant memories. Her initial chore was always the same, a rhythmic sweep of the concrete floor, pushing away the day's accumulated dust and sorrow. Each stroke of the broom was a silent conversation, a communion with the solitude that had become her constant companion since her husband, a man whose laughter still echoed in the deepest corners of her heart, had departed. The old radio, a relic from an era when chrome gleamed brighter and roads stretched further, was her next ritual. Its static-laced hum filled the quiet, a soft backdrop to the clink of metal against metal as she set up her workspace. Then, the brewing of coffee, its dark, earthy aroma weaving through the shop, a promise of warmth against the chill of the morning and the colder grip of her loneliness. This was her language, the tangible grammar of a life lived, a world rebuilt piece by piece. The hum of the radio, the smell of grease, the deep, resonant thrum of an engine tuning, these were the whispers of her late husband, alive in the cacophony of her craft. She spoke to him in the rhythm of turning wrenches, in the precise arc of welding sparks, in the sheen of polished chrome. Her workshop wasn't merely a place of repair, it was a sanctuary of memory, a cathedral of grief where every task was a prayer, every polished surface a reflection of a love that refused to fade. But that particular morning, amidst the familiar choreography of her routine, something gently yet profoundly disrupted the practiced silence. Propped against the weathered garage door, a small unassuming bouquet lay nestled. Not vibrant, cultivated blooms from a florist, but simple, resilient wildflowers, their petals still dewy, gathered from some untamed patch of green. They were bound not by a delicate ribbon, but by a coarse strand of twine, reflecting a humble origin. Grace paused, her broom suspended mid-sweep, a curious tremor stirring beneath her stoic exterior. She knelt, her knees protesting, slightly and with careful fingers picked up the offering. Amidst the wildflowers, a small piece of folded paper, creased and slightly smudged, bore a message penned in hesitant, unformed script. "For the lady with the black bike, thank you for the bread you gave me yesterday." Grace's gaze swept across the deserted street, a quiet interrogation of the empty spaces. No one. Just the nascent light of dawn painting the sky in soft, uncertain hues. A sigh, heavy with unasked questions, escaped her lips. She placed the wild bouquet in a chipped glass jar on her workbench, a vibrant, incongruous splash of life amidst the tools and metal. The day unfurled as days always did, a steady procession of repairs and solitary tasks, but the wildflowers remained, a silent testament to a small, unexpected kindness. She had no way of knowing that this unassuming gesture, this humble offering of roadside blooms, was but the first whisper of a new road, one that would lead her far beyond the familiar, well-worn path of her solitary existence into a landscape of shared grief and blossoming hope. The scent of those simple flowers, mingled with the indelible odor of oil and metal, began to subtly, profoundly, reshape the very air she breathed. The following morning, the bouquet reappeared, and the morning after that too. Each day the collection of wildflowers grew, a silent, persistent tribute. Different colors, sometimes with small, smooth stones nestled amongst the petals, or crude, almost childlike drawings tucked into the twine. Grace found herself watching, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time, anticipation stirring within her. One day, Peeking through a narrow slit in her office window, she saw him, a slender boy, perhaps 12 years old, his movements quick and furtive, placing the small gift before turning and disappearing into the nascent light, a wisp of shadow fading before detection. Grace recognized him then, the same boy she had seen days earlier, sifting through the discards behind the bakery, a silent spectre in the pre-dawn gloom. The memory pricked at her, a silent empathy stirring. The next morning she waited. The air held a crisp tension, the scent of wildflowers a silent question. As his small, almost ethereal form approached her door, she stepped out, her voice calm, a gentle current in the stillness. "Hey, little one," she said, her voice steady. "I think it's time we talked, don't you?" The boy froze, a deer caught in the headlights of a dawning world, poised between flight and tentative surrender. The boy, startled, stood rooted to the spot, his thin frame momentarily rigid. His eyes, wide and apprehensive, darted from Grace's weathered face to the wildflowers still clutched in her hand, then to the imposing black motorcycle that loomed behind her in the workshop's dim light. The silence stretched, taut with unspoken fears and hesitant curiosity. Grace, a veteran of countless mechanical impasses, understood the delicate balance required. She offered a soft, reassuring smile, a rare, tender expression that softened the stern lines etched around her eyes. It was a smile that spoke not of judgment, but of a quiet understanding, a recognition of vulnerability. I'm sorry," the boy stammered, his voice barely a whisper, thin as the dawn mist. I just wanted to say thank you." He clutched the last small bouquet, a fragile shield against the unknown. Grace simply nodded, her gaze unwavering. Silent invitation to trust. She saw not a trespasser but a lost soul, a reflection of the unspoken longing that often resided in the quiet corners of her own being. "And flowers are a beautiful way to do that," Grace replied, her voice a low rumble, like a well-tuned engine settling into idle. "But how about some hot coffee and a sandwich, too? It's chilly out here." He hesitated, a fleeting battle between ingrained caution and the undeniable pull of warmth and kindness. The scent of freshly brewed coffee, subtle yet insistent, seemed to waft towards him, a tangible promise. His stomach, accustomed to the gnawing emptiness of hunger, gave a quiet, insistent protest. Finally, the serenity in Grace's eyes, a calm ocean that mirrored the depth of her own endured sorrows, won out over his ingrained suspicion. He nodded almost imperceptibly, his shoulders still hunched, but the tension in his small frame eased a fraction. He followed her into the workshop, a place that smelled of possibility and forgotten dreams, a world far removed from the cold streets. He sat timidly on one of the dust-covered chairs by the workbench, his feet barely touching the ground, his gaze fixated on the wildflowers now arranged in the chipped glass, a silent promise. Grace moved with quiet efficiency, pouring 2 mugs of coffee, the steam curling upward like whispered secrets. She placed a generous sandwich, thick with sliced meat and cheese, before him. Eli, as he introduced himself, still spoke in hushed tones, but as the warmth of the coffee seeped into his chilled hands and the first bites of the sandwich filled the void, his words began to flow a little more freely. He lived with his ailing grandmother in a makeshift dwelling on the outskirts, a place barely fit for habitation. His days were spent scavenging, collecting discarded cans, a relentless, often fruitless quest for the meager sum that barely covered the cost of his grandmother's medicine. The weight of his world, heavy with the burden of care and the gnawing anxiety of scarcity, settled over them in the quiet hum of the workshop. Grace listened, her expression unreadable, a silent anchor in his tumultuous sea. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. She simply absorbed his words, her gaze distant as if sifting through the layers of her own experiences. She knew the unforgiving grip of loneliness, the chilling whisper of loss, the the way the world could narrow to a single, aching point. Eli's plight resonated deeply, stirring a dormant current beneath the surface of her stoic heart. A profound understanding passed between them, a silent recognition of two souls grappling with the profound weight of their own particular sorrows. She saw in his eyes not just hunger for food, but a deeper, more primal hunger for connection, for belonging, for a sense of safety. "You know, Eli," Grace finally said, her voice soft, contemplative, "motorcycles and people have something in common. When they lose their balance, when they feel like they're about to fall, the secret is not to let go of the handlebars. You hold on. You find your center again, and sometimes you need a little help to get back on track." Her words, imbued with the quiet wisdom of a life lived on two wheels and through many storms, hung in the air, a gentle mantra. She wasn't just talking about bikes, she was talking about life, about navigating the treacherous turns and unexpected bumps in the road. A faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred in Eli's posture. He looked at Grace, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing beyond the stern exterior of the lady with the black bike, beyond the formidable presence of a biker widow, into the depths of a woman who understood, truly understood, what it meant to hold on. A fragile tendril of trust, hesitant yet persistent, began to unfurl between them. That same afternoon, Grace led him to the back of the workshop, a forgotten corner, where shadows usually clung. There, shrouded beneath a dusty tarp, lay a forgotten relic, an old rusted bicycle, its frame scarred by time and neglect, its wheels buckled, its chains seized. It was a testament to abandonment, a silent monument to what had once been. Grace pulled back the tarp, revealing the bicycle in its dilapidated glory. A faint smile touched her lips, a glint of an old familiar mischief in her eyes. "I think," she said, her voice teasing, "this could be your first motorcycle." Eli's eyes widened, a spark of something akin to wonder replacing the weary resignation that usually resided there. He gazed at the bicycle, then back at Grace, a silent question hanging in the air. He had never imagined that such a broken thing could hold the promise of movement, of freedom, of a new beginning. The bicycle, a skeletal frame of its former self, stood as a silent challenge, a metaphor for so much that was broken and forgotten. Eli circled it cautiously, his fingers tracing the rust-pitted handlebars, his imagination beginning to stir with the possibilities that Grace's words had ignited. It wasn't merely a bike, it was a canvas, a project, a shared secret. Grace watched him, a quiet satisfaction blossoming in her chest. She saw not just the rust and the bent spokes, but the potential, the dormant spirit waiting to be coaxed back to life. She knew, intimately, the profound satisfaction that came from taking something broken, something discarded, and, patiently, meticulously, restoring it to its former glory, or even transforming it into something new and unexpected. This was her language, her craft, and now it would be their shared endeavor. In the days that followed, the workshop, once a bastion of Grace's solitary rituals, began to transform. The rhythmic scrape of the broom was now punctuated by the lighter, more eager sounds of Eli working. He meticulously cleaned each part, his small hands, accustomed to sorting trash, now carefully, scrubbing away decades of grime from gears and chains. Grace, with her practiced eye and vast knowledge of mechanics, tackled the more intricate repairs, straightening bent wheels, fabricating missing components from scrap metal, coaxing life back into seized bearings. The air, once thick with the silence of solitude, began to hum with a new kind of energy. The metallic clinks of tools, the soft rasp of sandpaper, the occasional muttered instruction from Grace, and most remarkably, the growing sound of shared laughter. A faint flashback flickered in Grace's mind as she helped Eli rethread a chain. She saw her husband, his grease-stained hands patiently guiding hers, teaching her the subtle art of disassembling an engine, of listening to its whispers. "Every part has a purpose, Gracie," he'd said, his voice warm with affection. "And when they work together, that's when you feel the true power." Now, as Eli meticulously cleaned a sprocket, a similar sense of purpose, of shared creation, filled the workshop. The pain of memory, once a sharp ache, began to soften, transforming into a tender ache of remembrance, a quiet gratitude for the lessons learned, for the love that had shaped her, and for the way those lessons were now, unexpectedly, finding new life in the eager hands of a boy. The immediate reward of their shared effort was palpable. Eli's joy, pure and unadulterated, became a steady beacon. Each repaired part, each polished piece, was a small victory, a testament to their collaboration. He wasn't just a recipient of kindness, he was an active participant in his own salvation, learning the value of persistence, the dignity of labor, and the profound satisfaction of creation. The transformation was not just external in the gradually improving bicycle, it was internal too. Eli's eyes, once shadowed with apprehension, now sparkled with nascent hope. He began to carry himself with a quiet confidence, his shoulders straighter, his voice less hesitant. The connection between them deepened, forged in the heat of shared purpose and the steady rhythm of their work. Then, one morning, Eli arrived at the workshop, his small frame unusually hunched, his usual eager light dimmed by an palpable sadness. He didn't approach the bicycle, didn't reach for a rag or a wrench. He simply stood in the doorway, his head bowed, a silent monument to sorrow. Grace, accustomed to reading the subtle cues of silent communication, felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She put down the wrench she was holding, its metallic weight suddenly heavy in her hand. "Eli?" she asked, her voice softer than a whisper, an inquiry that sought to breach the wall of his sudden silence. He looked up then, his eyes brimming with tears, a raw primal grief that tore at her own carefully constructed defenses. "My grandmother," he choked out, the words catching in his throat like shards of glass. She passed away last night." The air in the workshop seemed to thicken, suddenly heavy with the weight of unspeakable loss. Eli stumbled forward, collapsing into Grace's open arms, his small body racked with sobs. For a long moment, Grace simply held him, her own eyes welling up with tears she hadn't shed in years. It was as if two ancient sorrows, her own profound grief for her husband and Eli's raw, new wound, had finally recognized each other across the chasm of time and experience. In that shared embrace, two hearts, both intimately familiar with the brutal landscape of loss, found solace, a quiet understanding that transcended words. It was a moment of profound communion, where the act of giving became an act of reciprocal healing, a silent acknowledgement that some wounds, though different in origin, shared a common language of pain and a common path to mending. This was the turning point, the moment where the tentative roots of connection deepened, entwining into something far more profound than mere friendship, something akin to family. Grace, in offering comfort, found herself receiving it in turn, a quiet, unexpected grace. Pause for a moment. What dormant talent within you awaits the right person to awaken it? Share that small magic in the comments. In the days that followed, Grace became Eli's anchor in a world suddenly unmoored. The workshop, once a place of mechanical repair, transformed into a quiet haven of care and compassion. She tended to him with a gentle solicitude that defied her tough exterior, ensuring he was fed, clothed, and most importantly seen. She became the grandmother the wind had unexpectedly brought him, a steadfast presence in the aftermath of a devastating loss. Her empathy, honed by her own journey through grief, allowed her to navigate his sorrow with a quiet grace, understanding that some wounds healed not with words, but with patient presence and unwavering support. Their shared meals in the workshop, once punctuated by Eli's shy silence, now resonated with hushed conversations, and the comforting clatter of plates, a domesticity that had been absent from Grace's life for too long. The bicycle, their shared project, became a symbol of continuity, a testament to the fact that even after profound loss, life, like a broken machine, could be rebuilt. With Grace's guidance, Eli continued to meticulously polish and assemble each turn of a wrench, each tightened bolt, a silent act of defiance against the despair that threatened to consume him. The bicycle, a once-forgotten relic, began to gleam with renewed purpose, its frame taking on a sleek black finish, its details accentuated with a subtle, shimmering gold. It was a tangible representation of their combined resilience, a vehicle forged not just of metal, but of shared grief and burgeoning hope. The transformation was subtle yet undeniable, and it began to ripple outwards, beyond the confines of the workshop. Mr. Henderson, the mail carrier, a man whose route had for years taken him past Grace's perpetually quiet garage, noticed the changes first. He was a man of routines, and Grace's solitary figure had long been a fixture of his daily landscape. Now he saw two figures, a small boy often at Grace's side, their heads bent over an engine, or sweeping the floor together. He heard the faint echo of laughter, a sound that had been absent from the workshop for too long. His initial surprise morphed into a quiet, almost imperceptible nod of recognition when he saw Grace and Eli riding her black motorcycle to run errands, the boy securely seated behind her, a small helmet a comical counterbalance to his youthful exuberance. The motorcycle, once a symbol of her independence and self-imposed isolation, had now become a conduit for connection, weaving them both into the fabric of the broader world. As Grace and Eli worked, the aroma of her baking, the scent of fresh bread and warm cookies, occasionally wafted from the small kitchen adjoining the workshop. These weren't mere treats. They were tangible expressions of care, an extension of her newfound purpose. Soon the occasional curious neighbor, drawn by the unusual sights and scents, began to stop by. A woman inquired about a squeaky garden gate, another about a child's broken scooter. Grace, initially hesitant now, armed with a quiet confidence born of shared purpose, responded with a calm dignity. She offered advice, lent tools, sometimes even offered her skilled hands. Her kindness, once reserved for the silent memories of her husband and the solace of her craft, now began to flow outwards, nurturing the small connections that blossomed in her community. The indifference she had once silently endured began to dissipate, replaced by a tentative respect, a quiet acknowledgement of her intrinsic value. One day, a city official, a stern-faced woman concerned with unregulated activities, visited the workshop, her clipboard and official demeanor representing the very bureaucratic indifference Grace had often encountered. Her gaze lingered on Eli, a silent judgment in her eyes. "And the boy, madam?" she inquired, her voice clipped, implying an infringement. Grace, however, did not flinch. She met the official's gaze squarely, her own eyes holding a steady, unyielding resolve. "Eli is learning a trade," she stated, her voice calm, devoid of defensiveness. "He's learning responsibility, and he's learning that even broken things can be made whole again." She gestured to the nearly completed bicycle, shining in the afternoon light, then to a neatly stacked pile of meticulously sorted recycled metal cans. Eli, understanding the unspoken tension, stepped forward, offering a polite, confident explanation of his work and their shared project. The official, disarmed by their quiet dignity and the tangible evidence of positive change, hesitated. Her rigid posture softened, and with a final, almost grudging nod, she left, the unspoken accusation retreating in the face of Grace's unwavering resolve. And Eli's unexpected agency. The object that had once symbolized Grace's profound loss, her husband's old wrench, which she had kept polished and unused on a pegboard, now found new life. She used it to tighten the last bolt on Eli's bicycle, the weight of it familiar and comforting in her hand. no longer a relic of the past but a tool for building a future. The silence that once held her captive was receding, replaced by the gentle hum of connection, the quiet cadence of a life actively lived and shared. The workshop, once a sanctuary for her grief, was slowly, beautifully becoming a beacon for healing. The culmination of their shared journey arrived not with a thunderous roar, but with the joyful, almost silent hum of a community slowly reawakening to its own interconnectedness. The town, small and usually unremarkable, organized a modest neighborhood fair, a gathering meant to celebrate local talents and foster a sense of belonging. Eli, his bicycle gleaming a proud black with its gold accents, agreed to participate in the Children's Cycling Challenge, a small race for the younger members of the community. Grace, though she usually shied away from public displays, found herself standing on the sidelines, a quiet, reassuring presence, her gaze fixed on Eli. Her heart swelled with an unfamiliar pride, a warmth that chased away the lingering shadows of past grief. As Eli, with a fierce determination born of newfound confidence, pedaled his bicycle towards the finish line, a ripple of applause spread through the small crowd. He didn't win, but he finished with a radiant smile, his face streaked with sweat and genuine joy. It was more than a race, it was a public declaration of his transformation, a testament to his resilience. Mr. Henderson, the mail carrier, who had stopped by the workshop to wish Eli luck, stood near Grace. As Eli crossed the line, a profound smile creased Mr. Henderson's usually stoic face. He turned to Grace, his eyes reflecting a deep, heartfelt admiration. "He's a good boy, Grace," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "And you've done something truly wonderful." His words, simple yet profound, were a form of public validation, an acknowledgement of the quiet, powerful force Grace had become in Eli's life and in the small, unsuspecting community. It was a gesture of respect, a recognition of the invisible threads of kindness she had so patiently woven. The image that contrasted most sharply with the quiet, dusty solitude of Grace's early mornings was now vividly present. Instead of being alone in her cavernous workshop, her gaze lost in memories, she was at the heart of a small, vibrant gathering. She laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound that surprised even herself, as Eli recounted the race with enthusiastic gestures, his eyes shining. Other neighbors, those who had once hurried past her workshop, now approached, offering smiles and words of genuine appreciation for the small acts of kindness she had extended. The mended gate, the fixed scooter, the shared recipe for her crusty bread. The initial indifference she had once navigated had transformed into a warm embrace, a quiet acceptance of her renewed place in the world. The circle of kindness, once a single thread connecting Grace and Eli, had begun to expand. Later that afternoon, as the fair began to wind down, Grace saw Eli, not celebrating his own race, but helping a much younger child whose bicycle chain had slipped. With the confident ease of a practiced mechanic, he quickly reattached it, a miniature reflection of Grace's own patient guidance. The child's grateful parents offered Eli a small treat, and he accepted it with a shy, knowing smile, the lesson of selfless giving already taking root within him. It was a powerful, poignant image, demonstrating that the seeds of kindness, once planted, possessed an extraordinary capacity to flourish and spread, touching other lives with their gentle warmth. Grace watched him, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She realized in that moment that her healing was not an isolated event, but an ongoing process, intricately linked to the ripples of compassion she had set in motion. Eli, her unexpected catalyst, had not merely been a recipient of her kindness. He had become its echo, carrying it forward, amplifying its quiet power. The workshop, her life, the world around her, all had changed, not with a bang, but with the soft, persistent hum of a kindness finally finding its way home. As twilight deepened, Painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fading orange, Grace closed the heavy garage door of her workshop. The familiar creak resonated, but this time it carried a different echo. The silence that settled after the latch clicked into place was no longer a hollow void, a testament to her profound solitude. Instead, it was imbued with a quiet peace, a comfortable stillness that cradled the day's memories, Eli's laughter, the murmur of friendly voices, the scent of wildflowers still lingering faintly from the morning's bouquet. The tools, once extensions of her solitary craft, now seemed to hum with the warmth of shared purpose. The old radio, left on its low hum, played a soft, melancholic tune that no longer deepened her sense of loss, but rather underscored the bittersweet beauty of continuity. She walked through her small, orderly house, each step a deliberate rhythm. She ran a hand over the polished surface of a wooden dresser, tangible link to a past that now felt less like a wound and more like a cherished foundation. The pain of her husband's absence had not vanished entirely. Some griefs, she knew, were meant to be carried, not discarded, but it had transformed, softened by the unexpected grace that had bloomed from an act of simple kindness. The sorrow was no longer a suffocating blanket, but a tender memory, a silent testament to a love that had taught her how to love again, in different forms, for different hearts. She understood now that healing was not forgetting, but rather finding new reasons to remember, new ways to integrate the past into a vibrant, unfolding present. The narrator's voice, a quiet, empathetic companion throughout Grace's journey, now reflected on the profound alchemy of pain and purpose. It spoke of how the most desolate landscapes of the heart could, with time and intention, become fertile ground for new growth. How the invisible threads of human connection, often overlooked in the hurried pace of life, possessed the power to mend what was broken, to illuminate what was lost. Grace had not sought to be a savior, nor had she consciously embarked on a quest for self-redemption. Her transformation had been a gradual, organic process, catalyzed by the smallest acts of kindness, blooming from the quiet strength that had always resided within her, patiently waiting for a new purpose to ignite its flame. Grace finally stepped outside, the cool night air, a gentle caress on her face. She sat astride her black motorcycle, the familiar roar of the engine a comforting thrum beneath her. As she rode out onto the dark, winding road, the wind in her hair, the familiar rhythm of the journey enveloped her. But this time, the journey was different. The profound solitude that once defined her rides had receded, replaced by a deep, abiding sense of continuity. The road ahead no longer stretched endlessly into an empty future. It unfurled with the promise of connections, of shared moments, of a life rich with purpose. Every wildflower left at her door, every memory cherished, every new beginning woven into the fabric of her days had become part of the same continuous, beautiful road. She finally understood. She learned that the most resilient hearts are not those untouched by storm, but those that find new roads to travel, carrying kindness as their compass. This was the spring of her soul, a quiet revolution sparked by wildflowers and a boy's unspoken need. Grace's journey reminds us that the deepest transformations often begin not with grand gestures, but with a single hesitant act of kindness, a willingness to see beyond the surface, to connect with the hidden aches and unspoken hopes of another. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of empathy, the profound courage it takes to open a wounded heart, and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit to find new purpose after loss. Perhaps, like Grace, you've known the sting of invisibility, the weight of a silent sorrow, or the yearning for a connection that feels lost to time. Or perhaps you've witnessed a small act of kindness ripple outwards, transforming not just the recipient, but the giver and the entire fabric of a community. What quiet strengths do you possess, skills honed by experience, wisdom gathered through your own journeys, that are waiting to be shared? What small, unassuming offerings of kindness could you place at someone else's garage door? Without expectation, simply to acknowledge their presence, to offer a moment of connection. The world, in its hurried pace, often overlooks these subtle acts of grace, mistaking their quiet power for insignificance. Yet, it is precisely in these gentle exchanges, these moments of shared humanity, that true healing begins, that new paths are forged, and that the profound beauty of our interconnectedness is revealed. If Grace's story watered something within you, if it stirred a dormant hope or a forgotten kindness, let us know. Leave a flourish in the comments below, a silent nod of recognition for the transformative power of a quiet heart. Share your reflections. What did you learn from Grace's journey? How has a small act of kindness, either given or received, reshaped your own path? Don't let your own story, your own wisdom, your own capacity for profound connection wither in silence. Just as Eli's wildflowers broke through Grace's solitude, let your voice, your experience, your flourish bloom in this shared space.